Good morning, Stoke Damrell. We are going to be learning today how to use direct speech in a story to help move the story forward. I'm going to show you a story that I've written based on the classic James Bond series of films. It's a short story, it's only about 500 words long, and I'm going to talk you through the story, and then we're going to have a look at some activities for you to try at home. See if you can follow along with the story by following the pictures. Ernst Stavro Blofeld sat back in his chair. Through the bulletproof glass in front of his console, he could see the final stages of his dastardly scheme falling into place. As his team of engineers loaded the warhead onto the launching platform, he watched the telephone in front of him. His eyes gleamed. The Prime Minister had only 10 minutes remaining. Unless the money appeared in his Swiss bank account soon, London would be razed to the ground. 4 stories above, Nadya Molotov was also watching carefully. Although the casino was busy, she only had eyes for the man across the room by the roulette wheel. He had been following her for 3 days, and now he had got too close. She swept her long dark hair away from her face and reached slowly into her handbag. She edged towards the roulette wheel table slowly, the poisonous needle held tightly in her hand. Her eyes picked out 2 of Blofeld's henchmen standing by the door. One of them nodded at her as she drew closer to the man in the immaculate dark grey suit. "Excuse me, my name is Nadya. Have we met Mr. she asked sweetly as she carefully drew the syringe from her bag. "Bond, James Bond," he replied, and before she could react, his hand was clenched around her wrist. She uttered a faint scream as the syringe dropped to the floor. Without warning, the 2 hulking men closed in across the casino floor. He collided with the larger of the 2 men and, finding his feet, landed a punch square on the man's jaw. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the second man entering an elevator. The elevator was on the far side of the room. Bond sprinted forward, pulled his Walter PPK from his jacket and dived towards the closing door of the elevator. The sound of the bullets silenced the screaming crowd, and the man slumped to the floor as Bond skidded into the lift. The doors slid shut, and the lift began its descent. Suddenly, everything went black. Bond opened his eyes blearily. His head ached, and his hands were tightly bound. He struggled without success. "What an unpleasant surprise, Mr. Bond." Gradually, the hideous figure of Blofeld swam into view. "Do you expect me to talk?" "No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die." So here's my story written down so far. It starts describing Ernst Stavro Blofeld, my villain. He's got a dastardly scheme falling into place, and his team of engineers have got a nuclear warhead on the launching platform. Looks like he's planning to destroy the world. I've put a little short sentence there. His eyes gleamed. The Prime Minister had only 10 minutes remaining. Unless the money appeared in his Swiss bank account soon, London would be razed to the ground. And here I've introduced another character, Nadya Molotov, a foreign spy, probably working for Blofeld. She's looking for the man across the room by the roulette wheel. Notice how I don't introduce my main character, Bond, straight away. I talk a little bit about her, and there's a little bit of description to tell you what she looks like. She's moving towards the roulette table. A roulette table is like a games table in a casino, and she's got a poisonous needle in her hand. Her eyes are picking out 2 of Blofeld's henchmen, the nasty big men that are going to kill Bond. She walks up to Bond. She says, "Excuse me." She introduces herself. She asks this sweetly as she carefully draws the syringe from her bag. Notice how I'm describing what she's doing as she's speaking to move the story forward. Bond introduces himself, and before she can react and pull out that syringe, he's clenched his hand around her wrist. She's uttered a scream, and the syringe has fallen to the floor. And then I move into an action sequence in this paragraph. So lots of things are happening all at once. The 2 men move in towards Bond. He pushes a table towards them. He darts to the left. He knocks the glasses and bottles to the floor. Everything's happening very quickly here. I'm trying to describe the action. I want it to sound punchy and fast. He sprints forward, pulls his gun out of his pocket. He dives towards the closing door of the elevator. I describe the sound of the bullet and the man slumping to the floor as Bond skids into the lift. The doors slide shut and the lift begins its descent. Suddenly everything goes black. Sounds like they've got him. And then slowly he opens his eyes. Notice how I've used another adverb there to describe blearily, to show that he's either woozy or tired. His head aches and his hands are tightly bound. He's caught. He struggles, but without success. And then I put a little bit of speech in the end. You can see the hideous figure of Blofeld coming into his view. And I've left it at a cliffhanger. Have a look how the speech would work if I'd made it a little bit boring. Hi, my name is Nadya, said Nadya. My name's James Bond, said James Bond. Okay, how are you, said Nadya. I'm fine, said James Bond. It's boring. I've used said over and over again. I haven't described what the characters are doing as they're speaking. This conversation's going nowhere. Nothing's really happened. The story hasn't moved forward at all. And then I've moved to another sentence where I describe him clutching her wrist and making her drop the syringe. It's boring, it's slow, it doesn't make any progress for the story. It doesn't help the stories, the pace or the action. And look at how I've changed that around. Excuse me, my name is Nadya. Have we met, Mr. I've left that open-ended. I've got my ellipsis at the end. She asks sweetly. I've used an adverb here to describe how she's speaking. At the moment, she seems quite innocent as she carefully draws the syringe from her bag. And here I've got an adverbial just to describe what she's doing as she's speaking. Bond, James Bond, he replied. And before she could react, his hand was clenched around her wrist. It's tighter, it's sharper, it moves the story forward. It describes the action happening as the characters are speaking. And at the end of my story, I've tried to do the same thing. What an unpleasant surprise, Mr. Bond. Gradually, another adverb, the hideous figure of Blofeld swam into view. So I'm describing what's happening as the characters are speaking. Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. And here, what I've tried to do, I've dropped the said because it's obvious who's talking. And I wanted my sentences sharp and I wanted them to move the story forward. And I've left it on a cliffhanger at the end. So now I've got 3 tasks for you to try. Here's the first one. I'd like you to try and write me an action sequence. Bond's trapped, tied up and at the mercy of power-crazed villain Blofeld. Write the next part of the story. Remember to use short, sharp sentences for effect. If I go back to my story and my action sequence here, have a look at the way it's put together. There's lots and lots of things going on all at once in that paragraph. There's some short sentences for effect, like suddenly everything went black. But I'm using a range of complex sentences and fronted adverbials to explain what's happening. Lots of things happening all at once, simultaneously. That's my first task. To try and write a paragraph to explain how Blofeld has captured Bond and how Bond manages to get away. It's not going to be easy. And here's my second task for you to try this week. Write some dialogue. Use adverbs to write a conversation between James Bond and another character that you can choose. Don't forget to punctuate the speech correctly using speech marks. And remember, whenever it's a new person speaking, it needs to be on a new line. Don't try and use said all the time. Screamed, exclaimed, replied. Lots of those exciting words that you will have been using in school. And you can use adverbs to build those sentences up, just like I did in my story. Describe how the characters are speaking. Are they angry? Are they anxious? Are they cautious? Are they defiant? Enthusiastic? Have a think about how those characters are going to speak to one another. Try and keep the speech short and punchy, and try and make sure that the speech does something for the story, that it moves the story forward. And my final task, as if you weren't expecting it already, write your own spy story. You can use my Bond story to help you. You can make your own, but change the characters as much as you like. Could we have the first female Bond set in a different country, a deadly secret mission, or a car chase? It's entirely up to you. Try for about 400 to 500 words. Make sure you use paragraphs. Some of those can be action paragraphs. Some of it can be speech. Try and include some speech in your story as well, but make sure it's there for a reason. And do make sure, as always, that you share your finished story with your teacher. Good luck.